Hey, everybody. Quick announcement. It's Fred Diamond from the Institute for Effective Professional Selling and, of course, the Sales Game Changers podcast. Before we get to this show with Gina Stracuzzi, a women in sales leadership show, I want to remind you February 24th, IEPS partners Zev Wexler from Viacry and Tom Snyder from Funnel Clarity will be conducting a webinar on February 24th. You could find the link in the show notes. It's going to be AI and you. What do you need to be more effective using AI in the sales process? Zev Wexler is one of the AI experts out there, and Tom Snyder, of course, has been a guest on the Sales Game Changers podcast before. Is truly one of the experts on sales qualification. So join us on February 24th. All right, now on to the show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Sales Game Changers podcast. This time, this is a Women in Sales segment, and I am super excited. My guest today is Erika Irby. She is Director of America's Channel Marketing at Veeam Software. Previously, Erika was the go-to-market director at Microsoft across global partner solutions and device organizations, owning the strategy and channel marketing direction across US and Canada. So she is well versed in all things channels. She has over 20 years experience, in education, global IT distribution, vendor marketing, and she's been named CRN's Women of the Channel list and one of the 100 most powerful women of the channel. She is a speaker, a writer, and a leader in the IT industry. So welcome, Erika.
Thank you, Gina. I'm so glad to be here with you.
Me too. I know as we were talking a little bit off camera, it's taken us a while to get this organized, but those are usually some of the best conversations. I know I gave the audience a brief little introduction. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about yourself before we get into a conversation?
Sure. I'm super happy to be here. And I think it's interesting the way that we got connected was because of an Ultimate Partner Live event with Vince Menzione, who connected me with Fred, even though I didn't really know we were connected until he approached me. But this is exactly how the channel works, right? This is how the network works. We go to these events, we come together, something sparks something, and we have that conversation, and then boom, we're connected, and then things happen after that. So I think it's such a great example of how our channel works and how it can bring us all together.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's something that comes up in the Women in Sales Leadership Forum that I run quite often, like just the critical importance of your network, both internally and externally, and getting visibility like this. And you're not going to get these kind of opportunities if you don't network like you did. So it's a good example.
Exactly, absolutely, 100%.
Wonderful. So let's go a little bit into I want to really dive into both your background and what you see as opportunities for women and the value that women bring to customers, partners, companies. And, let's just talk about the layered nature of it all. So based on your experience leading go-to-market and channel marketing across organizations like Microsoft and Veeam, what are some of the specific behaviors that you see women consistently bringing that actually change outcomes with customers and partners, not just in culture, but in revenue, trust, and those long-term relationships?
Absolutely. Yeah. I really love this question. I really tried to think about, women are definitely unique, but as a whole, I think we bring a lot of empathy, patience, and attention to detail, I think are three huge qualities that in general, I think women tend to really bring to the table. I think we've mastered those soft skills required for good business relationships a long time ago, long before people called them soft skills. That was just something that, women naturally exuded. And I think that we also have the ability to be super savvy, keen, mindful. I think we also lean into our natural situational awareness. So
Hmm.
often we can like pick up cues and things that maybe others, may not notice. Just like men, of course, though, women are absolutely unique. And so some of us bring a very strong financial acumen or a strategic insight background or a really keen like business discernment. I think others bring incredible creativity and these big bold ideas and like bravado and like swagger. And we hear in the industry a lot of times referring to people as like a badass. I hope I can say that on this podcast, but a lot of
Absolutely.
times it's talking about a woman, and nowadays we call them a baddie, which I think is really hilarious, but they bring that attitude and that persona a lot of times. And I think often, some women, they just sitting there at the table and their physical being just exudes this sense of strength and power. And that in itself can really endear customers and partners to a company, to an idea, to a strategy, to a path forward, simply based on their belief that that leader, exactly what you said, is trustworthy and informed and is capable of like handling their business. And they really feel confident in that.
Yes, yes, and it absolutely shines through. I need to ask because you've been in some big rooms. Are there ways that in areas where you think organizations still fail to fully recognize or utilize that innate power, those innate strengths that women bring to the table?
I think sometimes, I think there's still a notion in our society about women being very emotional. And I think there's some negative connotations around that because the truth is, when I've been in rooms and there's been emotion, and especially if it's like a frustration or an anger, it is often coming from a man. But that is seen more as them being aggressive and um, passionate and like wanting to push the business, and they're expressing their frustration as they should be, and things like that. Whereas if a woman demonstrates any frustration, then she's too emotional and she's upset and she's not handling the situation, and not reacting well. And there that sometimes is just part of this kind of stereotypical society feeling this way. But I think there are many cases where, um, in an event like that, if a man sides with the woman or like expresses a similar sentiment or suddenly normalizes what she's doing, then the conversation can continue, and then everyone realizes, okay, this was a valid reaction or a valid thought, or we need to go back and revisit that, or let's work together to have a path forward. But it was okay that she brought this up in such a way. So I don't think it's more, or I don't think it's companies necessarily that are doing this. I think it's really about the folks in the room, what kind of leaders they want to be, and then are they setting aside any type of societal biases and instead just looking for the situation for what it is, and then reacting as if they would react that that person is a completely competent person regardless of their gender.
Wow. Yeah, that's very powerful, Erica, because I think you're right. It is situational, and um it's interesting because when I talk to men and I say, do you support the women in the meetings, or do you stop people from talking over them or whatever? And they're like, wait, what? And I think it's just that we all get very we're thinking about like the next thing that needs to be said in a meeting, or um
Hmm.
like taking notes or something, and we're not paying attention necessarily to the dynamics. And so your
Right.
point is so valid because there's a lot of allies in every room. It's just
100%.
sometimes they're not paying attention to what's actually happening in terms of dynamics. They're more focused on, okay, she said that, now I got to say this, to back, to drive the deal home or whatever the case is. So, I like the way you said that, and I hope that every man that listens to this will kind of pay attention when they're in meetings, um, and really bolster the power that's there with your female colleagues. So that's
Absolutely.
great.
And I was going to just comment that, some people, it feels really overwhelming, your point about allies, where, they think, oh my gosh, what do I have to do to be an ally? What do I have to, say? And it can become almost this like overwhelming task, like a part-time job. But really, to me, because the truth is, women have to be allies too. I mean, we should all be allies to anybody in the room who may not be getting their fair share of their voice time. So if you just approach it at even very small things, like if the leader is a man and a woman actually owns the business, she's the one that is leading that team. If he says something like, well, I'm going to defer to Erika. Here's my opinion. But that little comment of saying, I'm going to defer to her, indicates to the room that while he is sharing his opinion and it is very valid, the ultimate owner of the business is Erika. So when she speaks, that's what we really need to keep in mind. And it seems like such a small thing, but it helps to shift the folks in the room to just know, where the decision is going to lie, and then nobody is like questioning it.
Yeah, that is great. Those little, and you're right, it's just little things like, I have an opinion on this, but ultimately it's Erica's decision which way we go. And those little things, the world.
Yeah.
That's a great coaching um opportunity there. I'm glad you took it. All right, so let's talk a little bit on sales and marketing evolution. Um, so yeah, we've been reading more and more, and we even have a podcast now, as part of the Sales Game Changers podcast lineup. And it is really the intersection of marketing and sales. So eh, this next question, this next area that I want to talk to you about is really timely. Um, so we know that the intersection of sales and marketing is, it's always been a little bit of a struggle for the two entities, but now it's absolutely essential that they're working together, right? And so
Mhm.
how have you seen that relationship in the channel world between sales and marketing evolve? And how complex is it in the channel area?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I apologize that my son was just in here, but my kids have no concept of boundaries in my office. But this is real life. I have two teenagers, and they just come and go. But this is a real life
Everyone,
podcast, so
yep, that's right. Everyone, men included, can relate to that.
yes,
Um,
now we know that this is absolutely live. But I think that is a really great question. So, I would say, first of all, that sales and marketing are no longer these kind of like bifurcated orgs
mhm.
that they used to be. And now more and more, we actually see that sales and marketing are together, and they create like a go-to-market team, or a go-to-market, strategy and execution team. And this isn't like groundbreaking. I mean, I think people in sales and marketing would say this, that since the beginning of time, that the intent was that they would, work hand in hand to create and drive and close pipelines seamlessly, like as one, team. And this can be very complex, and often, especially I experienced this at Microsoft because it was such a massive company, but I even see this at Veeam too. It can be a very complex matrix organization, because it's critical that we all move in this complementary action, but folks have different jobs, and that's why this is created this way, that they're supposed to have different jobs, but we are supposed to, work really closely together. And ways to make that happen, we are seeing marketing teams now gold on sales pipeline, because having that direct connection when it comes to compensation is a surefire way to get people to work together. And we also see some like sales development rep teams gold on certain marketing pipeline. And I think that this is important because we're seeing a shift from, MQLs and SQLs really to goals that better align with each organization's position in the funnel or customer lifecycle. And that way we all are like interconnected along this journey, and everyone has their place, and then one action, feeds into the other. So marketing is no longer seen, in my experience, as this kind of like event planning, party planning, money bags. And it's more, whereas, and of course sales, of course, also not seen as this just die hard, we're going to get every single deal and we're going to tell marketing we don't need you. It's really not like that anymore. I do think in the past there was a little bit of this tension between sales and marketing, and sales didn't necessarily maybe feel the value of marketing, and then marketing was frustrated because they had leads rather that were just sitting there in the queue that marketing or sales wasn't touching because they had their own priorities.
Mm-hmm.
But now I do think that has changed, and marketing really is seen as more of a strategic investment, managing all that investment, driving demand gen that is in alignment with sales priorities. And I think we have evolved. I think it's now a true partnership. And even for companies that are still struggling with that, that's what they strive for.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see this a lot. We can see even some go-to-market teams actually have marketing and sales on the same team, and they're rolling up to the same leaders instead of being, in two separate orgs. And we also see go-to-market sections mandatory in QBRs, and marketing folks invited to different, critical sales meetings, and marketing teams ensuring that their sales teams are in lockstep with all their marketing plans, and not, moving on any investment until like a sales folks have agreed and have signed off. So it's truly, this like combined integrated plan. And I think all that is really super positive. And I do see us being very tight, marketing being very tight with their sales counterparts and vice versa. And we're seeing huge success with that. I will say at Veeam, we blew our sales target out of the water for FY25, and we also blew our marketing target out of the water as well. And that's no coincidence, right? That both teams overachieved and really worked hard together to hit that final goal.
That is amazing and really great advice. And it it's a true life example of what can happen when pretending they are but aren't really. So looking
Right.
forward, if you were advising a chief revenue officer and a chief marketing officer, what would you tell them to stop doing if they weren't working in alignment such as your teams are?
I think the first thing I would advise them to look at is their team targets, right? Always go to compensation. That is such a driver. And if folks are compensated on two totally different disparate things, that would be an immediate thing to fix. And then from there, you can, look beyond compensation, but also like goals, targets, prioritization. Sometimes what happens is if the marketing team is totally focused on just pure top of funnel demand gen, that's lovely. But the sales team is focused, of course, on nurturing, but then also closing, and that leaves a gap in the middle sometimes, because we can have a million leads coming in the top of funnel, but they're quite cold. And to get them down the line, we still need marketing to have multiple touch points and triggers to get them to continue to demonstrate their interest, to make those leads hotter and hotter, so sales can actually, jump in there and then take us all the way home by closing the deal. There's also a lot of like pre-sales activities that marketing should be involved in, and then that goes hand in hand with sales. Also with your engineering teams, you need to make sure that they're, also involved and making sure that we're there, touching with helping with those pre-sales activities, that there's investment there from both marketing and sales to help that. And then finally, I would also say, look at your programs. Those should be built in conjunction between marketing and sales to make sure that, partners, hey, we have to have these value incentives. Then that absolutely needs to be in there. But marketing shouldn't be creating those alone. They should be incenting the activity that we want, to ensure that product or whatever it is that is the prioritization of sales. So priority, alignment on programs, I think alignment on campaigns, alignment on compensation, and then making sure that you're not leaving like big gaps in your funnel.
That's great advice. Wow, really, really powerful advice. I hope everybody's writing this down. Or I guess you can just go backwards, but it is yeah, just rewind it. It's definitely worth hearing twice. So let's move on a little bit and let's talk a bit about if you were looking back over your career, what's one lesson, and this is turning things back to the women in sales piece of this. What's one lesson you wish women knew earlier in their careers and what they understood about influence, credibility, power in the partner-driven organizations, because you've had a very specific kind of career, and it happens a lot that we think to ourselves, "Gosh, I really wish I'd known this 20 years ago, because I would have done this differently." So, what advice would you have along that line if you were looking back?
That is a great question. So I would have two main things that really stick in my mind. One of them is from a purely career standpoint. One of the mistakes I made very early in my career, I had a company say, "Can we see your latest pay stub from your company?" I was so naive and I was so eager to jump into a bigger role that I shared it, not realizing that there was zero reason for me to do that. Like I just was so eager to move forward and get this new role. Because of that, I started off at a lower salary than I probably could have negotiated. But I didn't have the
Right.
confidence, I didn't have the awareness at the time. I mean, I was like, how old I was in my early 20s. But looking back on that, there was no reason for me to do that. I should have been like, this is my salary expectations. What are you
Mm,
offering me? Instead of them looking at my pay and being like, great, this is a big raise for her. And then I just took it. So I would say, if you're super young in career and have a salary requirement and don't be afraid to stick to it. And if a company asks for your previous, which I don't even know if they do this anymore, but if they do, the answer is no, and this is your range, and there's that. And then from a partner perspective, I remember very early on uh, hearing that the most critical element of success in the channel is relationships. And in some of my jobs, I was actually dinged on having that quality because it was considered like that's an easy thing. You should have more financial acumen. You should have more strategic acumen. You should have more business. And those things are all super important. And you will never be able to drive a successful business without those things. But I will die on a hill that when it comes to the channel, the utmost important element I think in success is absolutely trust and relationships. I think in the channel, one thing and if you work in the channel, you will 1,000% agree with me, but it's actually quite small. As even though there are just thousands of companies, billions of dollars, um, the channel itself is a pretty tight knit org. And we see this all the time because folks go from job to job. If you're a channel chief here, you're likely going to be a channel chief somewhere else. We see this with this is a simple thing, but it is a huge indicator. The CRN channel chief list, people vote on that. from your own community, from your own ecosystem. So you're a channel chief at Veeam. He's known, it's Kevin Rooney. He's known throughout the ecosystem because he's worked at other companies, and those channel leadership, they know him as well. So it permeates throughout the ecosystem. Everyone knows the channel chief that's at Microsoft. Everyone knows the VMware channel chief, et cetera. All these folks, HP. And it's because so many of us have these connections with one another because we go to these industry events together. We work together. We invite these people to our partner advisory councils. We are included in other boards and other advisory councils because we all like work together. Like what clearly we compete, but we also are driving technology together and ultimately what is really best for our partners, which are shared across the ecosystem. So having these relationships and really being able to connect with somebody on that level ultimately lays the foundation of trust, and then will ultimately help you be more successful with that business because they already know that you're on their team. They already know that you're somebody that they can trust and believe in, especially if you're going to convince them to do something that maybe is outside of their box, or ask them to try something new, or you have to have that element of trust and relationships, or you will never get past the first discussion.
Wow, there's a excuse me, a lot there. Excuse me. Hmm. Um, I've often joked at the kind of incestuous nature of public sector,
Oh
because
yeah,
people
that's
do
even
move
smaller.
from, yeah, they move from, employer to employer, and everyone knows them. I mean, you really cannot burn a bridge, um,
100%.
or even smoke it, because to your point, it's quite small. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in there, for women. But to your point, you really, once you get that trust, you have to keep it and you have to earn it.
Mhm.
Um, and it is not something to be taken lightly. I mean, that's where your influence and your credibility comes from, and your network will expand, and that gets you visibility in the industry as well as visibility in your company. So that is all great advice. And keeping in mind each time that it is a small community. So you have to keep that credibility up. I mean, that is
Yeah.
really important. Uh, wow. All just a great conversation. I really love all that you, excuse me, have brought up and the advice you've given. One of the things we like to do, is ask for any remaining advice you would like to give. And then I will ask you for one piece of advice that listeners can put into place today to help bring their career, their selling up to a next level. So first, if there's anything else you would like to share with us, we would love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think is super critical from both a sales and a marketing standpoint. I think this is really critical from a company standpoint, is storytelling. And at Veeam, you may have heard through the channels that we have a new CMO, Allison, and she really has introduced to Veeam the story of Veeam, about where we originate from and why we're different, and all these unique factors, and even weaving in our culture. And it's an incredible story, and I really cannot wait for it to be honed so we can go and tell it. We have to tell it internally first, and then we're going to go tell it to the world. But when the truth is, when you're in any job that you have, you're telling the story. That's what you're selling. You're selling either the story of how this product will drive your business, or how this service will save you money, or how what you can do will change the world. I mean, this is what we're all doing. So I think honing in on that ability to not just speak about features and benefits of a product, but to tell the story of what you do for the world, what you stand for, the difference you make in our ecosystem, and how you are going to contribute to someone's success, is a way more powerful way of selling than just traditional success stories, or you know what I mean, like really like
Absolutely.
um, telling that true story. It also helps endear your customers and partners to you because it's something that they can believe in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And years ago when I first got started in selling, I was a commodities broker, and that means you have to really get farmers and producers to believe that you have their best interests at heart in how you'll approach the markets and trade for
Mm,
them. And I just very naturally talked to them about my immigrant grandparents and how they struggled and grew things, and really appreciated the value of things, and without even realizing I was telling a story that they could relate to. And
mhm.
it served me so well before I even realized that this was a thing, that
Right.
that's how you build trust. So it's always been a great lesson for me, and it's something that stuck with me. So I love that you've driven that home for, a whole new generation of people. I mean, we hear about storytelling, but it's that relationship to trust building that I think is so
Mhm.
critical, because we all have biases, and a similarity bias is is something that people can see in a story,
Yeah.
even though we don't want necessarily to perpetuate bias. But when they can see that you care about something, and perhaps that's something they care about, and really that's ideally what's going to happen in the sales situation. You both
Yeah.
are trying to achieve the same goal. So it's really important to keep all of that in mind when you're telling stories, and align it with what you're trying to achieve. And it is probably one of the best ways to build trust that you can do. So I love that. All right. So what piece of advice do you have for our listeners that they can put into place today to start telling better stories, or propelling their sales career?
Yeah, and this is going to sound super selfish. And by the way, your comment about bias, you're right. We don't want to perpetuate negative bias, but we do want to perpetuate a bias for our products, right? Everyone wants to do that in the channel. They want to drive a bias for their product and services. So if if you keep that in mind, then exactly to your point, the stories you're telling are to drive that, nothing negative, but to drive that focus, that natural inclination to what you're selling, and you can do that naturally with your storytelling. um, my piece of advice, this is going to sound super selfish and people might be like, oh my god, but
Go for it.
i I would say always choose yourself. And what I mean by that is you are your best and most validated and the best version of yourself to everyone around you when you choose yourself. And what I mean by that is, you will be a trusted leader um, when you follow your own instinct. Because when you're authentic and when you make a decision based on what you think is best, and maybe despite other pieces of guidance in your heart, if you're like, I think this is the best decision, you will be a more trusted leader than if you decide to make a decision that somebody else thinks is right, but you don't totally believe in. And then you're only half invested because another part of you is like, ugh, this is not what I wanted to do. I can't fully, give myself. So I would just, every time that you're in a situation, just be super mindful of what your gut is telling you, what you think is for your best, And when you do that, you will not end up letting other people down because you said yes when you really wanted to, say no. And you will always be in a position of confidence and accountability when you choose what you think is best, even if what you choose turns out to not be the best decision, or maybe it didn't go as according to plan. You will be able to take accountability for any of the missteps or mistakes or missing the target or whatever with a true and open heart because you made the decision in the first place. So
Right.
whenever it just comes down to it, and also for your own like mental health and physical health and um all those things, even with your family. And again, this sounds selfish, but if you have children, you cannot be a good parent if you're not putting your own well-being first, because you will become exhausted or frazzled or stretched too thin, and then you will not be a good parent. You will not be a good partner. You will not be a good friend. You will not be a good coworker if you are not fortifying yourself first.
That is phenomenal advice. Phenomenal advice, and something that most of us women need to hear again and again, because it is
Yeah.
very easy to get stretched very thin and to put everyone in front of you, your own needs. It's why they say put on your own oxygen mask first. So
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to do that. It can be
it,
super challenging.
it can be. It can be. Well, Erika, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so very much for your time and your
Absolutely.
expertise and insights. And we look forward to talking to you again sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Yep. I can't wait to share this. Thank you, Gina. And thank you, Fred. I think you're listening in the background. I really appreciate this opportunity. I'm a big believer in like the universe provides, and I was supposed to be there at that event to meet you guys. And I appreciate you taking a chance on me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Goodbye, everyone. See you next time.